There is an opinion that in martial arts you can succeed only if you practice them from childhood. However, many fighters refute this opinion by their own example. And while some fight regularly at 20, others enter the octagon for the first time as a professional fighter only closer to 30. But this does not prevent them from building a successful career. I have compiled for you a selection of some fighters who came to MMA as adults. The owner of the most dangerous fist in the UFC, Francis Ngannou, was born in 1986 in a small Cameroonian village. As is often the case, Francis' family barely made ends meet, so the future champion started working at the age of 12 to pay for his studies. Young Francis was a stonemason in a quarry. He brought rocks and pulled carts with rubble. Monotonous work did not bring a lot of money, and Ngannou could not count on someone's help. The fighter often admitted that this time is the most difficult in his life, but it was these difficulties that helped him become what he is. Francis realized that life in Cameroon did not carry any prospects, and that in his country he wasn't likely to get out into the people. Ngannou's heart demanded changes, and these changes began with a move to Paris. True, immediately after immigration, the future champion had to spend 2 months in prison for illegally crossing the European border. For 3 months, Ngannou spent the nights on the streets and spent the whole day in the gym. But as the athlete admits, the positive side of life in Paris was the availability of food. Fernando Lopez, Francis MMA's coach, convinced him to compete in mixed martial arts. Having never been involved in sports before, Ngannou made his debut in mixed martial arts in November 2013. At that time, the future champion was 27 years old. In 8 years of MMA performances, he scored 17 victories, won the UFC Heavyweight Championship belt, and gained a reputation as the most dangerous fighter in the promotion. And the last his rival, Ciryl Gane, has become a real discovery in recent years for the heavyweight division of the UFC. He was born in France in May 1990. His father is native of Guadeloupe, who came to France to play football. It was he who was the first coach of his son. As a child, Ciryl was very agile and hardy. He showed great promise in football and basketball. But later, Gane decided that studies were more important than sports. Ciryl moved to Paris and went to college, where he studied in the management and marketing program. In 2014, one of the fellow students invited Gane to the hall. At that time, Ciryl was 24 years old and he had no experience in martial arts. All that was in Cyryl's arsenal was excellent agility and endurance. After training in Thai boxing for 2 years, Gane became the champion of France, and 2 years later, he made his MMA debut. At that time, Ciryl was already 28 years old. Now, despite the loss to Ngannou, Ciryl Gane remains one of the top heavyweights in the world and one of the main contenders for the UFC title. Chuck Liddell. Despite vast experience in various forms of martial arts such as karate, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and boxing, Chuck Liddell entered MMA at 29 years old. He was raised by his grandfather, who taught Chuck and his brother boxing techniques. Growing up, Liddell first became interested in karate and then mastered the martial arts of Kempo. Chuck's whole life was very closely connected with sports. He led the school football and wrestling teams, often got involved in street fights and trashed everyone in the district. A true all-around fighter, Liddell began his professional career after graduating from university. The choice fell on a new sport for Chuck, kickboxing, where in a short period of time he made a good record and won heavyweight belts according to the USMPA and WKA. In 1998, 20-year-old Chuck Liddell decided to try his hand at mixed martial arts. Usually, athletes at his age are at the peak of their careers, winning championship belts or thinking about retirement. But not Liddell. Having perfected his striking technique in kickboxing, he began his journey to worldwide recognition. Chuck's punching technique was special. Opponents could easily read when and where the punch would come from, but they couldn't do anything about it. And when they met Liddell's fist, they remembered it forever. During his 20-year career in mixed martial arts, Chuck killed almost all the top fighters of his time. Vito Belfort, Alistair Overeem, Tito Ortiz, Randy Couture, and Vanderlei Silva could not resist the onslaught of his blows. Liddell's name is inextricably linked to the history of mixed martial arts, and the UFC has included Chuck in its Hall of Fame to emphasize this. And beloved by millions of fans, Daniel Cormier is one of the oldest debutants in MMA history. He spent his first MMA fight as a 30-year-old athlete with a lot of experience. While studying at high school, Cormier became seriously interested in freestyle wrestling. Young Daniel came to sports in order to be able to stand up for himself, but soon the struggle grew into something more. He became a 3-time school champion and won the national championship twice, but the worst for Cormier was ahead. On Olympics in 2008 in Beijing became fatal in Cormier's career. Doctor discovered kidney failure in DC and forbade him to go on the mat. The US Wrestling Federation blacklisted Cormier, excluding him from the national team. Ben Askren also fell under the distribution, who also could not represent the country with dignity at the Olympics. The only one from the US team who won gold in Beijing was Henry Cejudo. After being suspended, Cormier decided to try his hand at mixed martial arts. In 2009, as a 30-year-old man, he began his professional career, and 3 years later, he became the winner of the Strikeforce Grand Prix in the heavyweight division. Cormier did not stop there, and in 2015 won the UFC light heavyweight title. 3 years later, this slim waist was adorned with a heavyweight championship belt. In August 2020, after 2 losses to Stipe Miocic, Daniel Cormier announced his retirement. Despite DC's failure in freestyle wrestling, MMA fans will remember Cormier as one of the best light heavyweights ever. DC is now a tournament commentator and an analyst for the UFC. As well as Junior Dos Santos, one of the most successful fighters, he started his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu career at the age of 21, having declared himself in Brazil. In 2006, the 20-year-old Brazilian made his debut in MMA. A guy with virtually zero martial arts experience and no strong base has been a nightmare in the heavyweight division for 4 years. Under the auspices of the UFC, he knocked out Fabricio Verdum in the first round. Roy Nelson, Cain Velasquez, Frank Mir, Mark Hunt. They all seemed helpless when they met in the cage with Dos Santos. Now, only memory remains of Junior's past greatness. He flew into a knockout into the last 4 fights. In any case, the Brazilian has written his name in the history of MMA. Yoel Romero, perhaps the most spectacular wrestler, is a 44-year-old Cuban, Yoel Romero. Romero began his career as a freestyle wrestler in the late 90s, having won the World Cup in wrestling and the champion of Pan America Championship in the weight category of up to 85 kilograms. Romero was honored to represent Cuba at the Olympic Games in Sydney. Romero confidently defeated his rivals due to phenomenal physical data and reached the final. There he was opposed by the world champion Adam Saitiev. According to the results of the fight, despite the colossal difference in physical data, the Russian wrestler won with a score of 4-1. Romero thanked his opponent and accepted the defeat with dignity. Over the next 7 years, Yoel Romero successfully represented his country in international tournaments. During this time, the Cuban won 11 medals of various standards, forever inscribing his name in the history of freestyle wrestling. In 2009, after ending his wrestling career, Romero decided to try his hand at mixed martial arts. At that time, the Cuban was 32 years old. Playing in small promotions, Romero put together a record of 4 victories. In 2011, he made his debut in the Strikeforce, but lost by knockout in the second round. 2 years later, Romero's ascent to the UFC began. Despite excellent athletic data and a wrestling past, the Cuban was never able to become a UFC champion, although he fought twice in fights for the title. In March 2020, Romero had his last fight in the best promotion in the world, after which he signed a contract with Bellator. The mystery of Romero's entire career is the fact that he never won by submission. An athlete with such a background and such data should have simply terrorized the middle division. But the Cuban relied on striking technique, which of course was at a very high level, but it was not possible to have tried for Romero champion belt. I would go on with the list of many good fighters, but I choose a few of them. So I disagree to the opinion that in martial arts, you can succeed only if you practice them from childhood. These fighters refute this opinion with their own example. What do you think? Write in the comment, and if you like the video, put like and subscribe.